moving into our next section, which is section 3, which is our question and answers. If we could have our panelists introduce themselves.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lindy Garner. I'm with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Sagebrush Ecosystem Team, and I work out of our Denver office, but I sit in Great Falls, Montana.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jane Mangold. I'm a professor and extension specialist at Montana State University in Bozeman, Montana.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Mealer, faculty at University of Wyoming. I sit in Sheridan and I have the pleasure of working with this great group of people thinking about annual grasses and rangeland restoration.
Hello again, Jeremy Maestas here. I work for USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service. I'm based in Bend, Oregon, but I focus on our Western Working Lands for Wildlife efforts.
As we dive into our question and answers today, we're going to share a few slides first. I kind of wanted to take the breakdown of all of the questions that we received from all of the participants from the registrations. And so I then went through all the questions, broke it down into categories. And our two big categories really overall are like treatment management options. But then I went further to then divide them up into treatments that did not include herbicide. When it does come to herbicide, we have a lot of questions that were specifically about indaziflam. So we will be answering some of those questions. And then some of the other categories we did have was like prioritization. How do you do that just in general, spatially, plant ID, soil questions, fire was another big one. And so we're going to try to answer some of these questions throughout the day as well. So the first question that I did want to address was plant ID. And the big question was, how do I get confident when identifying invasive annual grasses? And my response to that would be go out into the field, see if you can start to identify things. And so in your packet, we did provide our plant ID guide that was prepared by one of my colleagues here at UW. And it has great photos of the different parts of the plants. And so familiarizing yourself with that as well as going out into the field, I think could be a great start as to getting more confident with identifying these different species. And the other thing I would say is if you have the time and opportunity to go out during different times during the field season, that's a great way to see it at the different stages because it changes obviously throughout the year. With that, another part that's in your packet is going to be the indaziflam handout. And then after that, there's a couple of the life cycles as well. What do we know about indaziflam?
What do we know about indaziflam is a lot, and I would also say that we're still learning a lot, not just like us on the call, but us in general in terms of folks that are managing rangelands impacted by annual grasses. It's highly effective herbicide that inhibits root production. Chemically, like from a strict definition of selectivity, chemically, it's pretty darn non-selective. It's active on a whole lot of plant species and different types of plants and functional groups, but its use pattern gives it a type of selectivity, and that in many of our environmental situations, it ties up relatively shallow in the soil surface. And if it can't access roots and touch those roots in the rhizosphere, then it can't be active on those roots. And we tried to show this in that most of the deeper rooted perennials that have roots existing beneath the indaziflam layer kind of escape its effects and are able to maintain those roots. The reason it works well on annual grasses is because they have to germinate. They're an annual. They have to germinate and establish every year to reestablish their population. And they're in that shallow portion of the soil. And so as they germinate, start to produce a root, that root is not able to survive and sufficiently acquire the resources that those plants need. And that's shown in number 2 over to the left in that little inset. It has a relatively long residual compared to many of our other herbicides, which is one of the primary reasons that we think it has a longer duration of control for many of our perennials. trying to think of other key points that I can get to really quickly. I will say that one of the key use recommendations that you would find on the label, or really if you're speaking to anyone that's worked with it, is the importance of desirable plant community recovery potential. So if I go out and treat an area with indaziflam and all it is cheatgrass, the dreaded cheatgrass monoculture, indaziflam is going to do what it's going to do, and you're going to end up with probably bare ground. If there's not other plants with roots that are already established that can escape that indaziflam treatment, then we're going to have a hard time meeting your vegetation goals because it's effective. But if there's not good guys there, then we're going to have a hard time getting the kind of recovery we want to see. I'm about to get the hook, so I'm going to stop right there.
Okay. Thank you. So our next question is what other herbicide should we use with indaziflam? Jane or Brian?
That me, Jane, feel free to chime in as well. Kind of depends on timing. Maybe have we got the life cycle? You got the life cycle diagram with the herbicides up? So indaziflam acts as an ambush predator, as a pre-emergent herbicide. It has to be in the soil, in the zone where those seeds are germinating to work. And so if you miss that timing, then it's going to be a little while before you see the effects of indaziflam. And so there's any number of tank mix partners that folks have used in conjunction. And typically they have a post-emergence activity. Some of the ones that immediately come to mind are things like glyphosate. Imazapic has definitely been one that we've used in a number of settings. I typically think that as we move closer to precipitation that would cause a germination event before we're able to apply indaziflam, we've seen more consistent results when we're adding a tank mix partner that has post-emergence activity, such as Imazapic or rimsulfuron. There's been some other products that have been used as well. Maybe I'll stop with that. We might get into this a little bit more. Jane, did you have something you wanted to add? Or
Yeah, I would add that I think some of it has to do too with the specific invasive grass you are tackling. Ventonata seems to be particularly susceptible to indaziflam. So, that might be one of the invasive annual grasses where having the tank mix might not be necessary, especially if you're getting the timing right. So it kind of depends, cheatgrass and Japanese brome, may be more important to have that. Medusa head seems to be a little less susceptible to indaziflam than the other three invasive annual grasses that we're primarily talking about today. So it kind of depends on the species as well.
My next question is for Jane. What are the alternative treatment options to herbicide?
Yeah, all right. Well, I have 4 minutes to answer this question so we can get through a lot of the questions that were submitted. So I'm going to go through this real briefly, but there are other options. And I will say that a lot of the research that's been done over the years has really focused on cheatgrass. So when I talk about some of these generalizations, it's primarily in the context of cheatgrass. I'll try to point out some exceptions with some of the other invasive annuals. The other big kind of generalization I'd like to make is, we just got done talking about indaziflam and other herbicides. These other options for managing invasive annual grasses are going to be slower to act. And typically what we've seen in practice and in research is that you get more variable control across, sites. So you may see slower to act, lower and more variable efficacy with these other treatments. We generally talk about using other approaches in areas that might, maybe they're a little further outside of those core areas that Jeremy introduced us to at the beginning. Like there's a higher presence of invasive annual grasses relative to perennial vegetation. So targeted grazing. You can use targeted grazing. It's typically employed in the spring. Once the annual grass, especially cheatgrass or Japanese brome, is 1 to 2 inches tall, about 3 centimeters. And you maybe have about a 1-month window to do that until it starts seeding out. Once they start seeding out, animals don't really want to eat it as much. You can also use targeted grazing in the fall to target the litter. The litter of these grasses tend to promote further germination of the same species. We'll talk about more of this as well, kind of the second half of the workshop today when we get into the scenario and start talking about management tactics. Prescribed fire, a lot of people have interest in that. In general, it's difficult to get the timing right. We're trying to kill seeds when it comes to controlling annual grasses because that's what they rely on to be around from year to year. And you get the highest seed mortality from fire if the seeds are still on the plant. So if you think about that, the timing is really critical. Can you get a fire, use prescribed fire in a way that is targeting those seeds when they're still on the plant so that you're killing the seeds? I have talked to some people who've had success with spot treating, like with propane torches in the spring. You know, that may or may not be reasonable depending on the situation you're working in. And then prescribed fire, it's a little risky because especially with cheatgrass, we're familiar with that positive feedback between fire and cheatgrass. Revegetation, that's a topic for another webinar probably, but it really is reserved for the most severely impacted areas. Those areas where we're trying to contain and possibly remediate if we have the resources available. But that's typically done combining herbicides and seeding. Biocontrol, there's always a lot of interest in biocontrol. For most of the biocontrol research has been focused on cheatgrass again. There have been a variety of grass pathogens that have been explored for cheatgrass. More recently, there's been the discovery of a gall midge, a little insect that actually eats the seeds back in its native range. So that it's going to be an ongoing area of research, probably for a long time, but nothing is available right now that the pathogens, you know, showing promise consistently across many sites. And then the last alternative treatment I want to mention is just like soil amendments, both biological or nutritional. There's a lot of interest in soil health, and we continue to learn more about how the biota, the conditions in the soil interact with the above ground plant community. So this is an active area of research. So far, the research that I'm familiar with, both looking at biological and nutritional amendments, it's kind of variable across sites, and again, not 100% efficacious. So we're still learning more about that as a management option for annual grasses. I think that's it. I probably went over 4 minutes, but
No, you're right.
I think I was
Right
close.
on target.
Okay.
Perfect.
And again, we'll touch on some of these things later in the webinar when we're talking about management tactics and going through our scenario.
Perfect. Alrighty, my next question is for Jeremy and Lindy. Given the expansive amount of invasives, have we reached the tipping point?
I think we have many tipping points. I firmly believe we have not reached a tipping point in that we haven't lost the battle. You saw in the map that Jeremy showed that low level of invasion. Yes, it's widespread, but that just to me shows that we have reached a tipping point and that more immediate action is needed on the ground now. And we definitely have reached the tipping point and that we have to stop trying to address all the invasions and looking at it from that standpoint, but instead pause and focus down to where your primary values are on the landscape and where their invasions are still low to moderate, and try to anchor your efforts there and protect the good, and then try to work out from there to try to connect the other good areas and or deal with your expectations for the various different aspects of the units that you're trying to manage.
Yeah, I'll make my answer definitive. No, we haven't reached a tipping point on a lot of the West. And this is despite a century of feeling helpless against this. You know, Aldo Leopold, Sand County Almanac, wrote about this in 1933 or whatever, that cheat takes over in a chapter in that book. And he found the, attitude to be hopeless amongst land managers in the West. But yet, when we take a look with our new remote sensing technology, the picture still, the glass is partly full for me. I see an opportunity, and this is why the urgency is here right now to do something. And we have an opportunity with all the knowledge and science that we have and the tools to be surgical, to be targeted, to have wins at scale for people and society. And for species like cheatgrass, while they're widespread, there's definitely areas where we can move the needle and be proactive. For other species like ventonata and medusa head, the answer is even more clear. They are not everywhere. And if you see them showing up in your community, it's time to take action right away. In fact, you should probably be thinking about the risk of that before they ever get there.
Alrighty, my next question is for Jane. It's a two-part type of question. So I'll ask the first one, have you answer, and then we'll go to the second one. So what happens if I have found a ventonata population or another invasive annual grass? What should I do?
Yeah, well, I'm going to build off what Jeremy was just saying in terms of the need to act proactively, particularly on something like ventonata or medusa head, if those are species that are currently not present in your area. Cheatgrass is pretty ubiquitous. Yes, it's at varying levels of cover across the Western US, but these other two species are more contained in where they are. So, yeah, I would say learn how to identify it, right, and be looking for it. And then if you do find it, like, take action immediately. Like, don't wait around trying to figure out what to do. And the other thing I would say is be sure to communicate that you found ventonata or maybe medusa head, depending where you are. Be sure to communicate that, like to your state Department of Ag, your county weed district, whatever it may be. So we're sure we're communicating this across a region so that we can act on the landscape scale and we can work together some of these principles that Jeremy covered in the first presentation of the day.
And so then my second question is what should you do if you don't have it? How do you prepare for it?
Yeah, well, identify it. Okay, that was one of the questions people had about coming to this webinar was identification. There's lots of good tools out there to help you with that. Get in the field, spend time with people that know what it looks like and learn how to identify it. There's a growing body of evidence that shows the importance of perennial grasses for decreasing the risk of invasive annual grasses. So another thing you can do is make sure your general management of your rangeland is taking care of those perennial grasses. They play a very key role in grassland dynamics. So make sure you're taking care of those, good management. One of the things we've seen in Montana with ventonata, which has moved quickly across parts of the state, is we suspect that it has been moved in hay, perhaps contaminated seed. It's moved along our major highways. So be really vigilant about those major vectors and transportation routes. And those might be some places where you would want to prioritize looking for it. Is hay coming in from any other areas? Is it being fed in certain places, like during drought conditions or after a fire? Yeah, those would be some key things that I would say in terms of preparing for it. And again, act proactively. That was the principle we started off with today. And for those of you that have been in invasive species management for any period of time, the value of being proactive.
Okay, so we're going to move to our Next question, which is to Jeremy. What are the top roadblocks to moving in a positive, impactful direction with managing cheatgrass besides more research?
Well, we can tee right off of what Jane was saying, because I think we polled the audience, and I was surprised to see that acting proactively was right up there with staying committed. I mean, kind of surprised. I think it resonates with what I've seen. I'm in a unique position where I get to travel all over the West and see like the greatest examples of land manager success and all these rock stars. So for me, I've drank the Kool-Aid. I know we can do this. I've seen it on the ground. So part of my answer beyond the research is seeing is believing. Make this happen in your backyard, in your community. Have some demonstration plots. Use these principles we've given you to do it effectively and show people what's possible. I think that is so powerful in convincing people of the, you know, of efficacy and the need for proactive management. When we can get out there and show that we're able to do this effectively, I think it changes our culture. There's a reward system, for people to want to do that. We're hearing anecdotes. I was just on a call with our counterparts at the Soil and Water Conservation District in Grant County on Monday, and the testimonials of their large scale annual grass treatments are just phenomenal. These are coming from ranchers in their community who are seeing the results for themselves. They're getting their ranches back. That's the kind of thing I want to see all across the West that I think will inspire us to grow and really make this happen at scale.
We had a question that came up, and I know a lot of people also always think about this is from a money standpoint. And I think that's where, with our principles and the way we're trying to get you guys to think about things from a planning standpoint, money's always going to be limited, right? More than likely. We just came through a very kind of lush time with some additional funding, and things are changing, and that's always going to be limited. With us and this method and these principles, we're really trying to encourage you with whatever pennies you have, then pause and think about again those values on the landscape, where your priorities lie, and manage those expectations and use that money in the most cost-effective way that you can. And the other thing I just wanted to mention relative to roadblocks was, if you have been trying to do this in a few places and you don't feel like you're being successful, oftentimes we get caught up on the way we always do things. Again, take a pause and think about your application timing, your calibration. Application can be so important, and we all know that, but we get into our routines, and there might be ways that you can refine that. And in talking to your local people, your local county weed coordinators, and really digging into, am I doing it the way I think I should be doing it? And just confirm that with your process, and watch for the results again.
Go ahead, Brian.
May I chime in too? I love this. I do want to pick on Jeremy. I don't think he drank the Kool-Aid. I think you helped mix it a little bit, just to be fair. That teamwork piece goes beyond just your local team. And I think that's something that this core team has been trying to do a little bit more as well, is make some connections from land managers and landowners across the sagebrush biome and beyond that are doing this kind of stuff. And so there can be like a support network and peer-to-peer learning, and saying, hey, what have you guys done that has worked? And how did you attack this? Or how did you build your working group? And that's really one of the commitments that we have. Claire went through the different levels. Our level 3 is, we pack up a group of folks and we come to your town and help you think through some of these things with your specific situation. And so our hope is not just that we do some webinars and we do some workshops and then we just leave everybody to fend for themselves. Our hope is that we build a community of people that are working together to try to tackle this pretty challenging problem.
May I add to the question? I think the question we started out here with this one anyway was the top roadblocks to moving forward. And I'm going to kind of throw a Debbie Downer perspective in here, but I think it backs up what Jeremy and Lindy and Brian were all saying about the importance of working together and doing things right. And, if you're going to do management, let's make the timing right and that sort of thing. But I think one of the biggest roadblocks we're facing is that if you think about a warming climate, we're the models suggest that the West will become more conducive to annual grasses. And I always like to say that these invasive annual grasses kind of make their living by competing for water. And they're doing that in the fall and early in the spring. As we think about a warmer climate potentially changing the forms of precipitation that we get, the models, in thinking about the biology of these species suggests that they're going to take advantage of, rain instead of snow, the timing of precipitation, warmer, drier, mid summers, late springs, mid summers. So, the annual grass problem is not going away as we move forward. And I think that just emphasizes the need to, again, act proactively, defend your core, work together, leverage ecology, all of these principles that are core to our message today.